Okay, I'm back again. I do apologise for those of you who felt like I was late. I was trying to sort of put everything together at the very last minute. It's been a busy day for me, but I have got my notes organised. It's funny, my notes actually came from an old video that I created years ago that honestly not too many people actually have watched. So I thought that was quite unusual. So hopefully this will be really helpful to people. I'm just waiting for the live stream to catch up with me. Make sure the sound is coming through. Okay, so normally you will find what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the start time for this video down in the description so you can get past all of my chatter and so forth. And yeah, feel free to click onto that when you're rewatching this live stream. Now, I normally with my live streams, if you haven't been part of them before, is I present everything first and then I open it up for questions and answers. And I'm going to be doing exactly the same format. Don't run away near the end of the presentation because I will be around to answer questions. You can also add your own feedback to the discussion. By all means, that's all good as well. Okay, so we will get started with the presentation for today. There's a lot of information to cover. And I want to make sure this is going to be useful for people for hopefully a really long time. So I'll start. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And specifically what I want to talk about is not the image that I've just shown you. No, this is a Dungeon Master's Guide for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is how do you run a small group in the Lost Mine of Phandelver. How do you actually do that? This is not a video for players as such, but it's not going to affect you, so you can watch this video. This is probably the only video as a player out of my Lost Mine of Phandelver series that you can actually watch without it causing a whole lot of hassles for your Dungeon Master. So by all means, you can stick around for this video. Okay, so what happens when you have less than 4 players? 4 or 5 players is it's the sweet spot, basically, and you wind up with 3 players. 3 players, you can still play the game, but it gets risky. If you have 1 or 2 players, it really starts to get problematic, and this is where people start to get a little bit worried because often people are running the game for the very first time. They're playing with people who have never played before, and if you are a father or a mother and you're running the game for kids, the desire is not to have their characters wiped out during a combat or to spend a lot of time trying to make sure that sort of thing doesn't take place. So we need a few strategies and techniques to deal with that. So often what is quoted by a lot of people is to have the players play more than one character. This is by far my least favorite option because with a new player playing more than one character can get very tricky. It's actually better for them to only have to deal with one character and role-playing that character rather than trying to play 2 characters or 3 characters. That's really difficult. So that's really tricky. I would avoid doing that. What you can do is don't start them at level 1. Start them at level 2 or level 3, depending on how many people you have at your table or the lack of people you have at your table. That would be my advice to you. Really important, start them, don't start them at level 1. Start them a little bit higher so they've got a bit of experience behind them and they're a bit tougher. Now for those of you who haven't considered this option, I always advise people if you don't have enough players, do not just sit there and accept that. Start looking for new players who can play in your game. It's a long process sometimes. Sometimes it can take a very, very long time. But start using social media and looking for somebody you can pick up and put into your game. If you're playing with your kids, then find their friends, hopefully who can come over and play with them. Things like that. If you're playing in a really isolated location, maybe you can just try the feelers. Try to get more people in the game so you can keep going. Okay. What I would also advise is multi-classing. Multi-classing is a really good option, and the rationale behind that is if you multi-class, you can pick up something like Bard, Cleric, Ranger, or Paladin. These are all good because they can cast healing spells, and you're going to need that just in case one of the characters goes down and somebody needs to get them back on their feet. So that is always a really good option. I don't normally say this, but honestly, this is a great time to give them more money. Give them more money so they can buy more healing potions when they outfit themselves. It also allows them to buy better equipment, such as weapons and armor in particular. So giving them plenty of money so they can actually buy the things that will help keep their character alive, a very sensible option. Now, animal companions are notorious. We all know this. It's been around Dungeons & Dragons for years, but this is one of those times where instead of them playing two characters, it's actually good if they play one character and you give them an animal companion, because that animal companion now can stand in the front line and act like a fighter or a block while they are battling whoever it is. So give them an animal companion. What sort of animal? Well, just pick something from the Beastmaster. Those sort of options. Something for a low-level druid. Just utilize those sorts of creatures and beasts. But the Beastmaster is a good example. Now, I know what you're going to say. What about, they're going to get killed? Well, what you do with an animal companion that's being played by a character that you're using as sort of like it's not going to have all the personality that a full-blown character has. Make sure to give them death-dying saves. Don't let them just perish because they drop to 0 hit points. They're going to level up. Make sure to level up those animal companions. This is a really good option. When it comes to kids in particular, they love this. I know that there are a lot of people who really like this, and I'm going to say it right now. I have always found that women particularly like animal companions. So give them what they want if you've got a small group. It is going to do you no harm whatsoever. Okay, so what about we don't want an animal companion? You can pick up an hireling or a sellsword. There are plenty of options out there. They do not need to be played. They could be a squire. They don't have to be played as a full-fledged character. You could even run an NPC if you really wanted to, but there's no reason why you can't simply have a sellsword. Now make sure the sellsword is very, very simple. It is just going to be somebody who sort of acts like a fighter champion. That's the sort of character you want, where all of the maths and all of the abilities are tied up in the maths. There's no special abilities. All they do is sort of swing a weapon or hit something or shoot something, and that's really it. There's nothing else to sort of worry about. And that will simplify a lot of your problems. There are plenty of NPCs, as it happens, in the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Sildar Hallwinter is one that you could use. I don't like the idea of a Dungeon Master taking on more responsibility when they start out. So when I start talking about using NPCs rather than the players having a hireling or a sellsword or an animal companion, I'm only providing that as an option. I don't think it's a great idea, but if you feel you can manage it, then by all means go with it. That's fine with me. There are other characters within the adventure you can use, not just Sildar Hallwinter. You can use Sister Gali. I think that's right. Gali, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. If you've read the adventure, you know what I'm talking about. There's a couple of other characters that you could pick up as NPCs to help support the party and make sure they are successful. Now, they've got to ride around, or they've either got to walk or ride. So if you're going to give them a mount that can attack, something that can fight, because that means you don't have to worry about that animal companion that you were like, I don't like the idea. Look, it doesn't have to be a griffin. It could be a horse. It could be a war horse that actually can make attacks. Don't just ignore the combat, the mounted combat rules, and treat it as an independent creature. So in other words, it will fight alongside the player's characters, which is always a good option, right? Because you haven't actually had to create too much extra work. They've just got a very simple mount, and it can make hoof attacks or beak attacks or whatever it is that they do. And you can give them all sorts of things to ride on, and it'll make your adventure quite a lot more interesting. I want you to start thinking very carefully about how you're going to deal with character death. My suggestion is that you just have the characters captured. If you don't want to do with a captured and you want to have them make a new character, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But I would suggest to you have a few options where if one of them survives, they can take the body somewhere else and get that character who has fallen resurrected. Look, it is important for these characters to actually be successful in Phandalin. So it's actually worthwhile the Lord's Alliance throwing money at them to get the job done. particularly since Sildar Hallwinter not necessarily going to be able to do that job, certainly not up front. He's a bit older than he used to be. He's not a young, sprightly individual anymore. So consider those as options. Have a good talk with your players and discuss some of the options that you can use. And I've done many videos on character death, so go and check them out if you haven't seen them. And there's plenty of things you can do rather than just have them roll up a new character or create a new character. Okay, what about healing potions? Make sure as they're adventuring and exploring their locations, drop lots of healing potions. Magic items will certainly increase their power and make them a bit more powerful, particularly if you've got low-level characters. Low-level characters are a bit squishy, right? Once you get to about level 5, it's going to be not quite so bad, but dropping lots of healing potions is always a really smart idea. One of the problems that a lot of dungeon masters have is they look at an encounter and they don't seem to understand that if they don't reduce the number of attacks being dished out, the players' characters, particularly if you can't increase their numbers, then you're going to wind up with action economy, particularly at low level, kicking in. Higher level characters can truck out a lot of different attacks. Usually by the time they get to level 5 or 6, a lot of characters are casting more than one spell or making more than one attack. So therefore, it's not such a big deal. And low level characters can make, if they do 2-weapon fighting, can make 2 attacks in the same round. It doesn't matter what class it is, as long as you're carrying light weapons. And so therefore, they increase the number of attacks they can make. But you need to start thinking about reducing the number of enemies that they have to face. If you don't reduce the number of enemies, they're going to get overwhelmed, crushed like a bug, and we don't want that sort of thing happening. You don't always have to change the number of monsters. Sometimes changing the type of monster, you can get a bit creative. If you feel like, well, actually I could bring in a slightly lower rated or challenge rating monster, it would still be the same type of monster, but maybe I'm going to reduce the type of monster it is, drop it down a level. It's not going to be quite as powerful as before. You can reduce the number of hit points that a monster has. So instead of taking the number that's listed on the stat block in the back of the adventure, you can just skip that and I'm going to take that number and I'm going to chop it in half and see what happens. If it works, then keep doing it. So cutting down the number of hit points. You can remove some of the benefits that some of the monsters might have. If they have a whole lot of magical weapons or healing potions themselves and you want to eliminate those as well, then by all means do that. I recommend that you talk to your players and say, look, what sort of character do you want to play? Because if you play something like a paladin or a cleric, they're really, really powerful. They are very capable of healing. And even a bard it's very sort of general in its approach. So therefore, it can do a lot of different things. Also, you're dealing with new people, probably playing the game. Make sure that they spend a bit of time planning and thinking about what they will do before they do it. And if you can see that they are going to be doing something that's going to be a bit foolish, then I would say, look, I want you to think about that a bit more clearly. There's a couple of consequences to doing that sort of action. I'm not going to say you can't do it that way, but maybe you should think about this a bit more. Maybe you could try doing this or this. What would you like to do? Just pointing it out. You do not need to operate like an objective observer. You're not an objective observer. You are a dungeon master. You run the game, you adjudicate the rules, and a dungeon master, by all means, can also provide advice. And I find that some people seem to forget that sometimes. Don't forget that. It's important. Make sure as a dungeon master, particularly with new people, that you give them some advice about what would be a good strategy or technique or some of the things they need to do. And every single character that you send out into your adventure, I would say to them, look, no matter what you do, if you have enough money to buy healing potions, buy them. If you don't have enough money, chances are you will have enough money to spend the 5 gold to get yourself a healer's kit. Anybody can use it. It means when you use it as an action, you automatically stabilize a creature. And that is really, really beneficial. What do you do about the dragon? What if they want to go and fight the dragon? My suggestion to you is they will probably struggle with the dragon. So leave it, like level 4 is still going to be difficult with a small group. But if they deal with the dragon, say at level 5 or 6, it's a bit easier. And you do not have to present Venom Fang in your adventure for you to run the Lost Mine of Phandelver. There's no reason why you need to do that whatsoever. And the reason I was talking about the paladin, the thing about paladins and clerics is if you give them enough money, they can start wearing plate armor, and that makes them so much more survivable. They can take a lot more hits, and I would recommend doing something like that if you possibly can. Okay, so that's pretty much all of the advice I have. If you have any questions, if you have any advice you would like to add, start typing that into the comment section right now. I have many more videos you can watch on the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and you're welcome to go and check those out if you want to. I have a Patreon page where you can support me, so I keep doing videos like this. I have affiliate links down in the description where you can buy stuff from Amazon and the book depository, and I get a small commission from anything you buy, and there's no extra cost to you. And share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone, but I do need a drink of some water, and hopefully I've covered everything that I needed to. I was like, oh, have I missed anything? Is there anything I was supposed to add to that? But I think I have covered everything. I'm going to pull up the webcam. I'm just going to get my glasses on because it'll make it easier for me to actually see what's going on. And I have a discussion with whoever is in the live chat. Okay, so we'll flick it over. And let's see how we're doing in here today. Okay. All right, so I know that this is often a topic that people who have kids are looking for. So like how to deal with a really small group. Because often they'll have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 kids in their family, and they just don't have enough people at the table, and trying to find somebody to play with their kids who's appropriate is difficult sometimes, or you're in a really isolated location, that can be very difficult as well. Okay, all right, let's have a look at here. I think that was related to the last live stream. They were talking about blue dragons, high level, da-da-da-da, so we're going to skip past that. I'm not too sure why that's wound up transferring over to this. F-Hubba. There's each. Okay, when I was starting to DM, I had players run 2 characters each if I thought we needed a bigger party. They can work, that can work, but it is not a good, it's not a good option. Yeah, Hubba, you're right. It's why I don't recommend it, and why I talked about that option straight away, because it's often the most quoted option on YouTube and also quoted on the internet, and it's a red herring. It's a trap. It's a trap for new players. It's a trap for dungeon masters, and it doesn't actually solve your problems. Nicholas, hi Nicholas, how's it going? How do you deal with groups with no healers? Okay, so you drop more healing potions. You give them more money, Nicholas. If they won't take a healer, and this is why I say start them at a higher level and recommend that they multi-class. They only have to multi-class into cleric or paladin once to get access to a few healing spells or healing abilities. That's all they need to do. So if they take 1 level in cleric and 1 level in, or they take a level in paladin, that opens it up. They can now do some healing. If they refuse to take a healer of any kind and they insist on playing a character, because the problem with playing multi-class characters, right, is it gets more complicated, and you're trying to reduce complications for new people, and I totally understand that. Just drop a lot more healing potions. Healing potions are the way to go. And the healer's kit, F-Hubba's talking about it right now. I've already talked about it myself. These are really, it's a no-brainer. Every group that goes adventuring should have a healer's kit. There's no excuse. Every single member, just in case somebody goes down and there's no healer left to do any healing, you can still stabilize the character so they're not at risk of having to make death-dying saves. It is not going to win a battle, unfortunately, but it does present the Dungeon Master with an out for they get captured rather than they die. It means that the players now have control over whether the character dies or not, and a Dungeon Master can just play along with that. Pretty easy to do. And I've already talked about a whole lot of other options, which is just to increase their numbers. If hubba, we got that. Is it Nix? Would you say it's all right to allow to use a healing potion as a bonus action for a group with no healers? I think you'll find that initially it's not going to be a problem at low level, and later on it will become a real big problem. I've seen people try to implement this because nobody likes the idea of not being able to cast a spell or make an attack and give up that action to put a healing potion down you. And of course the concept behind it is, you drink a healing potion, and once you've drank the healing potion, you haven't caused any damage to the enemy. Therefore, the chances of them falling over and dying and no longer having to fight are removed. Therefore, they just attack again and reduce your hit points again. So I understand that concept, but if you're going to use that, only do it for a short period of time and make sure it's clear to your players that that's not going to be something that you are going to consistently do. Otherwise, it will create a lot of problems. That's right, F. Hubba, cell swords are good. Instead of taking a whole action to use a potion. Yeah, I've talked about all that. I think I've answered your question. It is not a great option, particularly at higher levels. At higher levels, you'd be surprised. A level 5 character, even just 1 or 2, will do all right. I think I have proved that with some of the combat tutorials I've run, where I've used a level 1 character and put them up against some pretty tough monsters. Now, it does come down to the luck of the dice, but it's still don't give up on them just yet. Remember, you can make this all work out. You're the Dungeon Master, okay? You don't have to deal with real life. You just make it all up as you go. Big Kid, have you ever DM'd a group with kids? Yes, I have. I heard character death is best avoided with kids. Yes, it is. In fact, it's a good topic to talk about, Big Kid. My suggestion to you is that players who are kids, particularly very young, they will not like the idea of killing something. And it's not something you want to necessarily encourage. So with a small group and you're dealing with kids, you don't really want their characters to die. They can be knocked out. Use the concept of the fate system, whereas a character was knocked out and they came back into play through whatever magic, or they were captured or something like that. There's lots of different things you can do. But yes, avoid actually killing a kid's character. They don't have the emotional maturity to be able to deal with that. So it's not a good option. And you will find that they won't necessarily want to destroy creatures. If you're dealing with boys, it's not so much a big issue. If you're dealing with very young kids, that's a bit of a problem. If you're dealing with girls will prefer to knock them out or make friends. So remember, and this is why I don't try to put out resources that sort of encourage you to just think of an encounter as combat. Although I will eventually do something like that, but it's not going to come straight away. And that is, their characters can deal with a situation that does not involve casting a spell and attacking, or using a weapon and attacking. They can use every other device available to them. There is things such as persuasion, intimidation, scaring something off, deceiving them. Use all of those sorts of things. Often kids will just want to, try to make friends with these interesting creatures. or fantasy creatures, rather than take them out. The wolves in the first cave of Cragmore Hideout are a good example where you might find that the kids really just want to have a pet wolf, and so feeding them and then making friends with them is like a super easy way of getting around that particular situation. And then, of course, they don't necessarily have to attack. They can have a conversation with Yimmick, and he might be deceptive and so forth, but maybe they trick him or something like that. So yes, kids, it really just depends on the age of the children or the kids. But yes, you are right. It is best avoiding death with kids, particularly young ones. Dolphus Colin, thank you. I love the start at level 3. Okay. Level 3, yeah, you could go at level 3. I think you will find that it's not absolutely necessary. If you're dealing with like a single player, then I would go level 3. I didn't actually say this in the video, but you should use all of these techniques all together. Don't just use one. Use lots of different techniques to make sure that everything works out for you. If you just use one technique, it's not going to work. You have to use multiple ideas for it all to sort of mesh together and work for you. If you just use one idea, it's not a great idea. You'll find that eventually what will happen is something will crop up that will defeat your strategy for dealing with the fact that they have only a small party. So use multiple strategies. Okay, I think I'm done. I think we've covered everything that we needed to discuss with regard to running a small group in the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is a Dungeon Master Guide. Look, all of these ideas are things that you can apply to pretty much any adventure. Oh, it looks like I'm not going anywhere. Somebody else has just commented. I'm coming, Michael. I just need a drink of water. But like I was saying, you can apply this to any adventure. Doesn't mean just Lost Mine of Phandelver. Okay. Michael, you don't need to be sorry. I do know that my live streams usually in the past are quite long, and you don't necessarily get notified straight away when I'm online. So it's all right, Michael. So you got your question in. Any recommendations for squeezing in Forgotten Realm lore into the adventure? Struggling to find a way to insert what's that? Toral's creation myth originally. Okay, so my advice to you, and thank you, I'm glad you love my content. That's awesome. Jordan, without a Jordan has a YouTube channel. I'm subscribed to his channel. He covers Dungeons and Dragons Forgotten Realms lore. And he did a video not so long ago about the lore and history behind the Lost Mine of Phandelver and that location. And that is a good video to go and watch. I don't think I've linked it down below, but if you type in Jordan, you will find he has a whole lot of information. The easiest way to find his video is to type in Lost Mine of Phandelver lore, okay, or history or something like that, and it should pop up. You're welcome for the tip, Michael. Hopefully that will help you build things out. You do not need to have any more history and knowledge than what is presented in the book. Chances are that players won't ask you a lot of questions about that sort of stuff. If you have really invested players who love to know everything about the world around you, then great. But if it's just for your benefit, it won't be necessary, okay? Just my 2 cents on that. Okay, so I think we've covered everything that we need to on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. I need to get going because I'm supposed to be going and sorting out some maps for Cragmore Hideout, which means maybe tomorrow, not promising anything, but maybe tomorrow I will run the first major location. I did the first ambush location. I ran that as an encounter, but I might actually be able to show you some dynamics with the Cragmore Hideout map, and I will sort of play it. Well, I won't play it out as such, but I will describe and explain a lot of those different locations to those of you who may be interested. Yes, happy map making. Looking forward to more of your videos. Thank you again. You are welcome, Michael. No problems. Okay, otherwise, if that doesn't happen, people had asked me for a video for the Lost Mine of Phandelver covering what level would be appropriate for which location, so they could sort of drive the players and their characters to particular locations in a particular order. I don't advise doing that, but since people have asked for that video, and since I am clearly not completely with it with regard to understanding what people want, I'm just going to give people what they want, because I give up trying to figure it out. It's just too hard. Okay, so it is time to sign out for me. So have a good day, a good night, good morning, good afternoon. Look after yourself and your family, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.